think we are going live. So welcome to this edition of Unbound Women, which is our monthly-ish discussion, exploration over at the Unbound Press. Each month we invite a panel of our authors to come together and have a discussion around a particular theme. And this month we are talking about reclaiming our voices. And the reason that we were inspired to talk about this is it was following actually the murder of Sarah Everard, and the kind of outpouring that happened after that. And for me, actually, particularly, it was very much around like it wasn't even protest, but the vigils that took place after Sarah was murdered and how they were shut down in a very aggressive way. I felt a real kind of physical response to that. And at the Unbound Press, we were inspired. It was actually Joe Gifford, who's one of our team members, who suggested that we run this project where we invite women. And when I use the term women, what I mean by that is those who identify as women, those who've been socialized as girls, like anyone who's been impacted by misogyny or resonates kind of with this work and with these themes that we're talking about. But we decided to run this project where we were inviting women to reclaim their voices, literally to express themselves vocally and to share that on our platform. Just to kind of free flow really about how they were feeling, what their experience has been of being a woman, and what they wanted to reclaim. So we've been sharing some of those voices over on our platform. And I really wanted us to come together and just have a discussion around this theme to see what wanted to come through this month. So I'm really delighted to be joined by Natalie Farrell, Sarah Wheeler and Brier Hart, three of our magical authors who wanted to join and talk about this today. And as ever, it's a really free-flowing conversation. We'll just see what wants to come through in this space. And as we are doing this, we are going live on Facebook. I can't see the comments. I could probably log on to Facebook separately and have a look at the comments, but I'll get distracted. But, you know, we will come back and have a look at the comments afterwards. So if you have questions or anything you want to share, please do pop them in the comments, and I certainly will come back and yeah, respond to those afterwards. But welcome everyone, wonderful to have you here.
Hey, thank you so much.
I wanted to kind of kick off the conversation by inviting each of you to share about your own kind of personal journey around this of reclaiming your voice, what it means to you to reclaim your voice. And I guess that word reclaim is interesting because it kind of presupposes that there has been something to reclaim, and it's kind of an assumption. I know for me that certainly feels true, but I'd be interested to hear about your experiences of it.
I'd be happy to kick off. Yeah, it was really interesting thinking about, well, what does reclaiming my voice mean to me? And two things almost immediately popped into my head. One was when I was in the mother phase of my life cycle, and it was about standing up for my children, one in particular, and fighting battles on their behalf when they weren't able to fight those battles for themselves. And up until that point, I don't think I'd ever really needed to even think about certainly not reclaiming my voice. I think I mean, certainly there were times in my life where I have been shut down. There's no doubt about that, but not in ways that suddenly hit me in that mother phase of life where I had to stand in my authority. I had to stand in my fierce lion mother mode and fight battles. So there was that, and then the second piece came in was when I became menopausal. So I was moving out of the mother phase. I'd moved into enchantress, walking towards becoming crone. And of course, those of us who have been or are menopausal know that when we hit that enchantress stage, just you try and stop our voice, what we have to say, what we are feeling, what our view is, we suddenly, I was in a place where if I felt I needed to challenge something, I would challenge it in a very different way to how I did when I was in my mother phase and standing up for my children. Interesting. So it was reclaiming, and it was definitely this time it was about reclaiming, because my experience of the menopause is that it's it is happening at a cellular level. It is a transmutation as well as an alchemical transformation. And deep in our bones, we know as women that we have, either in this lifetime or in past lifetimes, been shut down. We've been burnt at the stake, we've been drowned, we've been abused, all of that stuff that we know. And when we hit that enchantress phase, when we're menopausal, that it comes up. It's like a kundalini. It comes up, and it there is no choice other than to be with it, as far as I'm concerned. So really, that was the moment of really reclaiming a voice that I didn't even know I had. Yeah. Potent and powerful voice that there was no suppression of it. There was, no question about anybody, not myself, not anybody else, stopping that voice. So that's not to say that I didn't have to fight.
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, lots of occasions where, looks have been given and eyes have been rolled and comments have been made. What's this woman talk? She's talking about her blood, the cessation of her blood. She's talking about the menopause. Just shut up. Shut up. So really, actually, it has been in that phase where the most, some of the biggest challenges have come up against that, because, society is still very much of the view that we don't talk about the menopause.
So
but yes, we do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Brier.
Yeah, I can just sort of chime in now, just thinking about voice and reclaiming. It wasn't even just about reclaiming voice for me at this particular time that I'm going to refer to. It was about trying to find some way to express a sense of injustice. And I was doing that through using my voice. And it was at a time when I was kind of coming through the stages of interacting with the police service after having reported sexual violence to them. And it got to the stage now where so many people that have been through this circumstance meet the metaphorical brick wall that your case is not going to go any further. And so coming away, having to kind of reconcile with oneself that this person and persons have done this thing, really horrendously violatory things, and nothing will happen to them. There will be no accountability. There will be no comeuppance in what we call the justice system. So I remember speaking out a lot about that at the time, and not in a public way at all. It was all very like private and personal between myself and my family and friends. I was not in a space where I could even deal with having a kind of public debate, discussion about that. It was just way, way, way too raw. But there was this like boiling kind of swelling inside me that was like, I can't not speak about this, to try and like process my own recalibration of what had happened to my body and my mind and my soul in that time. And then being like, well, how am I going to move forward now? Because there isn't anything that's being done to these people in response to what they did. And I'm very much of the opinion that when there's sexual violence, it's always the victim who ends up picking up the pieces, either alone, or if you're kind of privileged enough to have people around you who can hear you when you want to speak about those things, then you'll be able to do that with a community or certain, like a peer group, for example. But generally it's yourself on your own trying to find the words and the voice to express, like, how is this fair? This is not any kind of justice. I remember sitting in a meeting with two lawyers from the Crown Prosecution Service that I'd kind of lobbied for by myself, because I just didn't get why there could be no conviction of the persons that had done what they did. And it stopped being a meeting of, you know, person in the supposed victim role, and then the people who were there in the roles of lawyers. It became a group of women having a meeting together and trying to sort of reconcile and like dissect and unpick, how come, this was in 2017 at the time, how come in 2017 there can be men walking around having done things to women's bodies who will have there'll be no recourse whatsoever. And they weren't expecting to have that kind of conversation. I think what they expected was to have a victim come, and I'm using the word victim because in the eyes of the law I was one, a victim to come and be in pieces in front of them. And, you know, there was a lot of tears that were shed, but it was very much like, we can't just look at this one tiny piece. This isn't just me. This isn't happening in a vacuum. This is happening to women everywhere. And being a person who walks into that room immediately with the privilege of having a white body, it's easier for myself to come and speak out about that than perhaps people who were in much more marginalized communities and having to kind of find themselves at that intersection of, okay, we don't believe you because of the color of your skin, or we're going to disregard you because you're from a background that we consider not within the kind of binds of how society is supposed to do society. So Traveller, for example, or Romani, and it gave me an insight into how much people have to use their voices to try and find some kind of recourse, some kind of justice for the myriad different traumatic experiences that people go through in life. And that speaking out was hard and good and right, and nothing came from it. There was never going to be a change that happened after that one meeting, but it felt incredibly powerful, while also at the same time, like this kind of swinging seesaw of, this is really powerful and I'm really glad that I'm standing up for myself and other survivors here, but what's really going to happen? So that's what immediately came for me, speaking about reclaiming.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate that point you've made about, like, we can do this for ourselves and in those situations where it is us and maybe one other person or even a group of other people, and just feeling like, is there, like, particularly when we're talking about like the systems that we live within, you know, is that going to make a difference?
Yeah, so you walk into a system like the legal system, and it very much is a system. The system does do what it's designed to do, which is marginalize people who are not favored by patriarchy. So you know, people say a lot that the system is broken, and I heard somebody say, no, it does exactly what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
So you can walk in and start to, you know, you face that and go, I feel like I have all of my ancestors and relatives from like 1,000,000 years ago behind me going, yeah, this is fucked that you're still having to talk about this in 2017. What the hell?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sarah.
Hi.
Natalie.
Hello, everybody. And as you lovely, beautiful women were talking, the word that came up for me was exposure, exposed. And I think when we use our voice, we very much become exposed. And having used my voice for a very grand part of my life, I started singing when I was 11. That I have always used my voice in a very exposed way, but almost the singing voice was a hidden. I could hide behind the singing voice. So I love this subject totally and utterly. I love talking about the voice, reclaiming the voice. I think that some people, like you said at the beginning, Nicola, they don't even know that there's anything to reclaim. And I think that's quite scary in a sense, because my experience of reclaiming my voice has actually come from me suppressing my own voice. Perhaps it's come from society and things like that, but I really feel that I squashed my own voice. And I've written and I talk a lot about being a mouse. And I felt that I was hiding a lot, hiding in relationships, not thinking that what I had to say was worthy. Yeah, it just got so squashed. I remember actually in one of my first relationships having to speak out and just feeling so sick, you know, and it was easier to keep everything down. So when I think about reclaiming the voice, it's in kind of different categories. That exposure that people feel actually on that visceral level to actually speak out, like Sarah was saying, it's scary, it's hard. And then obviously Brier's saying that you will get attacked potentially, you know, there's that's what comes from being exposed. And then there's that other thing of actually people believing in their voice and believing in what they have to say and the right to say it. I talk a lot about this. And then there's actually, how do you use your voice? You know, and how do you learn to love your voice, the sound of your voice? And that's kind of, I suppose, what comes through my years of being a singer and a performer, a communicator, and connecting through the voice. And then I absolutely love sharing the sound clip on the Unbound Press page, because more so now, what I'm really passionate about is reclaiming my voice as being a mother without a child. And I'm really sick of being asked this question. So having turned 40, do you have any children? No, I don't have any children. Do you want children? Well, that's a really, really kind of, but yeah, I do. So you want to know more, you want to know the truth. And then just like Brier was saying, like with menopause, I just tell them everything. I tell them about the miscarriage. I tell them everything. I've been so happy to be exposed in the last, well, it happened actually, my miscarriage was 2 days ago, 4 years ago. So it's lovely to be here expressing in this way. And I feel there's so much power when we open up and share in this way, because I know there'll be other people watching this that resonate with all of us and what we have to say on many different levels. And yeah, so I love sharing this idea that as a woman, still in 2021?
Yeah, I know.
We're still in 2021, yeah.
Okay. Who is the president?
Okay. Is that we are still going between so many different roles. And that's what my poem expressed. We go from being sexy to scrubbing the toothpaste from the sink to you know, having that sexual desire within us, within ourselves, to, you know, the voices within our head. And there's such a switch on, switch off that we do so well. But what happens if we actually stopped and didn't do it for a while? Then what would the other people that we support have to do and have to face for themselves? So, yeah.
I just love like the different perspectives each of you has just offered and brought to this conversation. I mean, how magical is that, you know, from the first question. And actually, as you were speaking there, each of you, I was thinking, you know, what does it mean to me? And I think in the past, I would have said, like as you said, Natalie, you know, it was primarily me who kind of squashed down my voice and held back, which I certainly did for a good chunk of my life, like up into my mid to late 30s. And actually my first book, Heal Your Inner Good Girl, is really about that personal process. And what I can see now is how a lot of that, or maybe most of it, even all of it, was the way I'd kind of internalized the patriarchy and these systems that we live within that gave me the message, and very often not at all in obvious ways or like in my face ways, but very kind of, well, now I can see they're not so subtle, but you know, I was unconscious to them through a lot of my life, that my voice didn't matter, that my voice had no worth, no value, and that it was like safer for me to keep quiet. So it's really interesting to see that. And also you spoke to this as well, Sarah. I made a video like a few weeks ago when we were like first exploring this theme of reclaiming your voice, about kind of ranting, like giving yourself permission to rant, and how, well, I hear a lot of women, I hear it in the Unbound Writing Mastermind, people saying, oh, I'm not sure if this is a bit ranty, and you know, we can kind of hold back around that. And then like the whole video was around kind of giving yourself permission to rant, because it's just, I can't remember, I looked up what the meaning of rant was or where it came from, but it was something about being passionate, basically. So it's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? And I also recognize that it's relatively easy now, especially now for me as a white woman, and you know, with this process that I've been to rant. But there are groups where if they are going to do that, like women of color and other marginalized groups, then they would receive a different reaction. So there's so many different layers, so many different layers to this.
Yeah, I think it's going back to what you were saying about voice being like not important, and kind of like squashing that down yourself. Like, yeah, for sure, we squash down our own voices, and in those really also subtle but unsubtle ways, like society does tell us to do that. It's very much part and parcel of what I'm going to write about for the next book, which is this place of being on this sliding scale, like a pendulum that swings between being too much and not enough. And I think the voice is so one of those things that if you dare speak out, then what patriarchy would say that you're being is that you're being irrational, you're being hysterical, you're not thinking clearly. This is from intuition rather than intelligence, or so there's that, like the too much, get back in your box kind of thing. And then there's the not enough, because actually, sorry, your voice is inconsequential anyway. So imagine living in those spaces, and to people living in those spaces, women living in those spaces in different degrees because of, you know, whatever kind of background you come from, that's going to be influenced even more. So you're too much and you're not enough. And then add on all the kind of extra layers of where you were brought up, how much money you had when you were smaller, what's, you know, that whole thing about your socioeconomic background. Because I think in the spiritual community, which has a lot of kind of resonance with the topics that we write about, people are very quick to kind of pretend that socioeconomic problems don't exist. And it's like, oh, you can manifest and think yourself out of any kind of problem. It's like, no, tell that to a child who lives on a rubbish dump in Brazil. How are they going to manifest themselves out of this problem? You're saying it's their fault because they happen to have been born onto a rubbish dump. So having the voice to actually speak out above some things that just kind of land as like BS a lot of the time. So I'm weaving in this kind of spiritual fallacies within my next bit of writing as well, and how not to kind of like throw the baby out with the bathwater if there's stuff that really, really works for you and is empowering, but also deconstructing like, how come we've been taught to think like in these ways?
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. And like each of you, yeah, that's why you're here, part of the Unbound Press family, because you've written books, you're writing books. And I just wonder, like, as we are reclaiming our voices, is it something, well, for you, is it something that has to happen in public? Like, what was that decision to actually go through this process? Like, each of you, what you're writing about, what you've written about, what you're writing about is, you know, you're sharing elements of your personal experience. So what was that kind of calling to go through this process of reclaiming your voice, like within the form of a book in public?
For me, in my first book, Take Off Your Cup of Tea, which is, you know, the core of it is being the mother of a child who shows up different in the world, who is otherwise labelled as disabled. And the process of writing that book was essentially, primarily, a healing process of the oppression that I had felt as a mother fighting for the rights of her child. You know, going back to what you've been saying, Sarah, about the patriarchy, you know, the system is set up to discriminate against disabled people. It is, and marginalize them. And so anyway, within that process of writing the book, it was about healing, but it was also about wanting to get a message out to other women, mothers and fathers, families who were living in the same situation as I, that there are alternatives to what the system tells you have to do. You do not have to the system tells you that you've got to do it in this way, in a very small confined box, and you stay in that box, otherwise you're a stroppy mother, you're a difficult father, and there's always a threat over you of what they will do to your child if you speak out against what the system is purportedly offering you and supporting you with, which is a bit of a fallacy, really. So it was about healing. It was about getting a message out there that you can find your own way in this, and that there is support. And that feels, and it was coming. I spoke at the beginning about being in the mother phase and now being in the crone phase, and how different that energy is, and how I communicate, and from what place I'm communicating. So that felt, you know, when I finished that book, it was a closure in one sense. I mean, it will never be a total closure, because I will live all my life supporting a dependent child. But the second book, Becoming Crone, which is giving voice to other menopausal women. So it's much less about my story, my experience, because I also expressed that in my first book. And it's, for me, it's shifted into that place of giving voice to other women, to bring about change. Again, to say to people, you don't, you know, the menopause is not what you've been led to believe by the patriarchy. You can put that in the bin, put the lid on it, and shove it to one side, because actually this is probably the magical experience of your life if you allow it to be. I've lost the thread of my thought now. It's well, actually, as I've been saying that, I think in both situations, you know, it was, finding the courage to be vulnerable and, like you were saying, Natalie, and to allow my voice to be heard for myself, but also for other people in my own situation, in this situation where that will resonate with other people. And you said it as well, Sarah. You know, I don't think it ever is just solely about ourselves, because we don't live in isolation. We're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that does then, like, we can have that sense of, oh, is this going to make a difference? But well, I believe that it does ripple out in some way and beyond what we see, and beyond even kind of maybe the number of books that we sell or any of that. It does, the impact does ripple out into the collective when we are brave enough to share our voices. Thanks, Brier.
Yeah, I totally love how that's just how that's come, because that's what I was thinking for me. And I've been talking so much in the last couple of weeks about no more playing small and, you know, being seen. And it goes back to that thing of what you were just saying, that you were safe. If you didn't speak, you'd be safe. And if you do speak, you're exposed. So we're kind of what Sarah's saying, that where's the middle ground? For me, definitely, it was, as always, I had to do it. They told me not to, so I did it anyway. That's what I wrote at the beginning of my book. You know, it really, I have to share this for others. I have to share this for others. And that came through so clearly as well in the book, you know, that these words, somebody just said, oh, your book. I was like, no, it's not my book. There's no possession to this, although I know I'm birthing it into the world through Unbound Press and all your wonderfulness, which is incredible. But you know, it isn't my book. It's going out, like you said, to ripple and have an impact. But the reason to write it was to share this message. And as Brier was just talking, then what I was also thinking about, which is really important, is that when we do share, we ask, you know, I ask others to share their voice, to DM me, to direct message, you know, but people don't. Because there's something that, maybe you're talking about metaphorical wall, there's something that is stopping this interaction. And maybe it's because it's online and people aren't trusting still. But I have created so many genuine connections through online, including your faces in front of me, and just so many beautiful souls that I've met. So that's really fascinating for me. What's stopping them from sharing their voice when they're actually following us already? They're being, you know, totally inspired by the work, moved by the work, motivated. So it's a kind of, as you said, it's such there's so many levels to this. So with my book, it's a companion to help people to trust, predominantly, trust the own messages, their own intuitive awakening that's happening, that they haven't been listening to, because we've all been there, we've all ignored. And then to actually activate and own every step towards their out of the ordinary story. Because as you know, Nicola, in my work, I just love talking to people about their stories. I love other people's stories. And just before I finish, I do get a lot of people saying to me, why would people want to hear my story? And again, I think in 2021, how and why are people still saying that, you know?
Yeah.
We're all so important. Doesn't matter who we are. We're all so important, you know?
Yeah.
I love what you're saying, Natalie. Yeah, that, let's put it in quote marks. Why would somebody want to hear my story? And what seems underneath that, if I considered that for myself, like maybe a few years ago, would be this concern that, yeah, again, like what you're saying, just is either not enough or too much, or just something that isn't going to be acceptable or isn't useful, or isn't that, but it's this. or XYZ, vice versa. Yeah, and I wonder when that kind of habitual sort of ingrained learning of what I say doesn't matter, or who would be interested, or it's boring. I wonder when, like, collectively that's just going to shed like an extra layer, you know, and somehow that sharing of the voice just gets a little bit freer in the ways that feel right for individuals. Yeah, with the book writing process and like why doing it, why share the voice, it was with Shadow and Rose, it was very much a sort of mixed bag of healing process for myself in the writing, kind of guiding myself through the bits of recovery to do with sexual violence that I'd sort of forgotten that I'd made, and being like, wow, that was genuine progress. And sometimes it's easy to forget in the kind of day-to-day melee and, you know, all the weirdness and potential weirdness from last year continuing on into this year. Like, people are making massive journeys all the time. People are doing extraordinary feats of courage and recovery and healing and sobriety. And I mean, like, why wouldn't we want to hear loads and loads and loads of those messages? It's so damn positive in, like, you know, not always like pleasant and palatable, but it's an overall positive way of going, yeah, shit happened and I got through, and so can you, and you're so not on your own in this process either. So there was the kind of like personal healing bit of the book, but also like when I was recovering, I felt quite like I didn't have this sort of space that was like a bridge between going, okay, so I've told the police about what's happened and I'm going to be looking into getting some therapy, but I just needed this kind of mate that was next to me who'd actually been through what I've been through. And, you know, women everywhere go through so much horrendous shit, but I didn't have like a close friend that was sharing an experience with me. So I kind of wanted Shadow and Rose to be like a bridge between the two, like a kind of sounding board, cheerleader, shoulder to cry on, somebody to big you up when you're on the floor, and that kind of putting my voice out there to let other people have the experience of being seen, heard through the invisible pages of an ebook, which is what it was. It's still a ripple effect, like that intention still goes out there and it still reaches people. So yeah, I'm kind of in the inquiry of what is the overarching message of sharing the voice for the next book. And it's something to do with, you know, just putting it out there for women that have had enough. Like, no, no more.
I love it. I love it. Oh, that's so beautiful. And it's interesting, actually thinking about this as each of you were sharing, what you said, Natalie, about, you know, sometimes we invite, like, you know, people to connect and interact and engage with whatever we are sharing, and that might not happen. And there can be this sense of, oh, you know, I've shared my story, I've put my voice out there, and I think we have to trust a lot of the time that it is like doing what it is meant to do out there. There's a lot of overwhelm, I think, particularly online, and even the thought sometimes, and I experience this, I might see something that I really resonate with, and like the thought of even typing a comment or sending a message can feel like too much in a way. It's like it's enough for me just to receive that and connect with it, and I like trust that whoever has shared it can feel that sense of resonance in some way. But I think that can, you know, it can almost put people off from sharing, that idea that you might put something out there and not get the response that you were expecting. So it's a really interesting point as well.
Yeah, like, does it then send the sharer back in the cave of like,
Yeah.
Like a balloon. Oh dear. To do that. Probably nothing.
Well, I'm the way I see it and the way I approach it, like if I feel called to express something and it's coming from that place, like I really feel like I need to, whether it's in a book or a social media post or sending an email, whatever it is, I just trust if it comes from that place, like I'm doing it for the part of me that wants to express that, and like hopefully it will be received in the way it's intended. And if it creates a sense of connection or impacts or kind of supports or helps somebody to feel kind of seen and understood in some way, even if I'm not aware of that, then that's enough.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to remember, because each of us receive information in a different way, and we respond to information in a different way. And also for many of us, our experiences of sharing with other women actually has not been safe. Growing up in those groups where, there's been the backstabbing and the bitchiness and, all of that stuff. So a lot of us haven't felt safe in these sorts of situations. And my own experience has been in finding, in order to feel that my voice is being heard, is finding the different ways of doing that. So the book is one way, but for me, the biggest thing, the most important thing for me is sisterhood. It's being in circle with other women, and that did not play for me as I grew up. It really didn't. It's in recent years, and it's what I create for other women. And I think if we find those places where we feel safe, where a space is being held for us, so that we feel safe about expressing ourselves with our voice. And I think that for me, when I feel safe when I know I'm being heard, when people are listening, because otherwise, you're speaking, and if you're not feeling that's being held and heard, it's futile, and you walk away from that feeling worse than you did when you came in. So I think it's finding the space in which you feel held and safe in order to express yourself, and that can be in a myriad of different ways.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. For me, that's the last 7 months of being in the Unbound mastermind has lifted me beyond any thought or expectation. I mean, I didn't even have any thought or expectation. I don't really know how to put it into words. It's just, if you go back and watch the last 7 months of my rising, you'll see it all, and even being here speaking like this. And I think it does come a lot from trust and just having a go.
Having a go. But being willing to get it wrong as well,
Yeah,
huge part.
Yeah, I think like being willing to get it wrong, being willing to be like, oh, that didn't go very well. Okay, learn from that, and what next? Yeah, I think that's part of the Unbound journey for me, is going, doesn't matter if it's not good, doesn't matter if it's not good enough, doesn't matter if it's not the best, doesn't matter if it's not really planned out, doesn't matter if you haven't, meditated for 2 hours before writing something. I don't meditate for 2 hours at a time anyway. You haven't put every single thing in place before you do something. It's like, just run with it if it feels good, and then come back to it later if it doesn't.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh my god, I can't believe that's 45 minutes. It's just flown by.
What? Oh my god, yes, I just looked at my watch.
Obviously something we could talk about for a long time, and I kind of feel like each month the conversation, even though it might not directly be about this thing, like everything that we do at Unbound is about this in one way or another. So thank you for being part of it. Before we finish, I'd love each of you just to share the best way for people to connect with you, because I know you're kind of in different places, kind of online. You have different online homes. So just letting people know how they can connect with you if they would like to.
So for me, it's Instagram, and it's at Cosmic Soul School _. And then I have lots of links in my bio for different places to hear me, read me, feel me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Natalie. And your book's out later this year?
Yeah, later this year. Yeah.
Very exciting.
Amazing.
Thanks, Natalie.
Yay. For me, it is the best place to go if you want to have like proper actual connection with me is through my mailing list, which is on my website. It's yourenoughyoga.com. I do have an Instagram. I'm sporadically active and inactive on it. So it's You're Enough Yoga with Sarah Wheeler. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah.
There are two places you can connect with me. One is on my website, spiresofwellbeing.co.uk. I have a blog on there, and I also run a monthly menopause wisdom online circle. And that's for perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal women. So come along and join us. It's fabulous. And come and visit me here at Spires of Wellbeing. I run rewilding retreats. I'm in the most beautiful place in rural West Wales. We're open for business. So my heart and my soul is waiting to welcome you to come, and we'll sit down and have a cup of tea together.
Yeah, it is the most beautiful space. We might just be cooking up something together around that, Brier, but more details to follow. We'll just leave that one hanging. Oh, thank you all so much. And as I said at the beginning, I'd be really welcome comments, questions, like insights. If you've been watching this and something sparked off in you, I would love, we'd all love to hear from you. The Unbound Press is very much about, yes, our community of authors, but our wider community as well. So I'd love to hear what you've got to say about reclaiming your voice and your experiences of that. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, and we'll see you again soon for another episode of Unbound Women. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.